being the target of an organized crime hit, narrowly escaping an abusive cult, and battling breast cancer has caused Kendra Petty to wonder, how much can one person take? More, Life replied. Much more. Hard to believe. Here is a story of survival unlike any you have ever heard, I promise you. Kendra Petty began life by enduring years of childhood abuse, culminating in a stunning breakout from a cult, led by her parents that nearly consumed her. Escaping that, she married an abusive drug addict. But the story doesn't end there. She successfully climbed the corporate ladder only to discover she was working for an organized crime family who tried to murder her. So it would take every survival tactic she had learned, and even more, to avoid ending up dead. And that is just the beginning. After being diagnosed with breast cancer, she finally realized that the changes she needed to make could only be achieved by exploding the life she had deliberately created. Listen closely to her story of how she not only survived, but learned to thrive in spite of it.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
Kendra Petty is a woman who has succeeded in an all-male industry, becoming an executive vice president at 2 firms, a dynamic public speaker, a powerful negotiator, and deal maker. Welcome, Kendra.
Thank you, Carol. So glad to be here.
I am so glad that you are here sharing your story because I think we could probably talk for a few hours. And I know your story is in your book. So let's begin telling your story.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for having me. It's an honor. I wrote the book because I have spent a lifetime, literally a lifetime, in a cycle of trauma and tragedy, my childhood and my adulthood. In my childhood, I was born in Oklahoma, raised in Oklahoma to a family. My mother was severely mentally ill, and it progressed and got worse as we all got older. She was extremely physically abusive, emotionally, verbally, mentally abusive, but very, very physically abusive. Every day with my mother was a 911, sort of hair on fire. You never knew when she was going to explode, but you knew it was going to happen. And oftentimes it was directed at me. There were other children in the family, but oftentimes it was directed at me. The nemesis for that direction came from the death of my brother. My brother, when he was 10 and I was 8, he was killed tragically in a horrific accident. We were together and we were crossing a highway, and he was hit by a car. We were very, very close, thick as thieves. He was my best friend. I followed him everywhere. He was my protector. And honestly, he died protecting me. His instructions from my mother in coming back across the highway, and we had gone fishing in the morning, and my mother instructed him to make sure he got me back across the highway safely for a birthday party. So that was his focus, was to make sure I was safe. And he did not see a car that was barreling down the highway at about 70 miles an hour, and it was just a horrific accident,
Oh
and
my word.
devastating for my family, devastating for me. I was only 8, but I was completely lost without him, and I blamed myself for his death. My whole life, I blamed myself, and
Mm,
that accident made my mother go even madder. It made my father leave us after a couple of years because they just could not stay together. They were just so broken. I developed horrific night terrors that lasted a lifetime. I would run out of my home and my hotel room in my sleep. In my night terrors, I'd wake up in strange places. So that accident just really was the catapult for so many things in my family, and
mm,
it literally destroyed my family. My mother remarried. She remarried a neighbor. Strangely enough, it was her best friend's husband, and her best friend died of cancer about a year after my brother died. And my parents got divorced about a year after that, and she ended up dating and marrying the neighbor. And I inherited 2 stepsisters and had a whole new family. And I think in their grief, in both my, we'd always gone to church. We were sort of Sunday go to church Baptists, nothing too serious. After they both experienced so much loss, my mother, the loss of her son, the loss of her best friend, the loss of her marriage, my stepfather, the loss of his wife, they were both seeking comfort, and they started a church in our home that morphed into an extreme fanatical religious cult with some very bizarre rituals that paved the way for even more abuse in the name of God. Lack of medical care because we weren't allowed to go to the doctor because they would pray over us and put their hands on us to heal us and say God would heal. So we weren't allowed proper medical care. We were cut off from the entire world. We weren't allowed to associate with anyone that didn't go to our church. Although we went to a Christian school, that was the closest thing they could get to being removed from the secular world. So we weren't allowed to have friends outside the church, weren't allowed to go to friends' houses, weren't allowed to watch TV or read the paper or magazines. We were just really cut off from the world and lived in seclusion. For that divorce, while my parents were still married and while my brother was still alive, a babysitter began sexually abusing me for a number of years, even after my brother died, and until we moved. So there was just a whole lot of turmoil growing up. And after my brother died and when my mother got remarried, they started this cult, and it was just so controlling, this cult. And it was all God, all Bible, all the time, but really their spin of the Bible. And they started this church in our house, and it grew and it morphed, and it grew so much that we moved into like a retail space, and then that we outgrew that, and we moved into a church. We outgrew that, we moved into a bigger church, and I think it might still exist today. I'm not sure, but it was. I have a lot of religious trauma over all of that because I was a very active child and teenager and was unfortunately injured a lot and needed to go to the hospital a lot and wasn't allowed to. And just, typical checkups and regular care was just not available. Medical care was not available to us. But I finally left the house at 18. After I graduated high school, I moved to New York City, where I put myself through college. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school in Manhattan. And it was an incredible experience for me, leaving Oklahoma and leaving all of that trauma. It was very freeing. I learned so much. I also learned that I was gay. And so I came out and started living that life and trying to understand what that life meant for me, especially being raised religiously. I struggled quite a bit with, am I going to hell? And, read the Bible for a number of years trying to find peace with it. And, finally just decided I'm not a bad person. There's just no way I can be going to hell. And of course, my view on religion since my early 20s and coming out has definitively changed. And so now I have no fear of going to hell at all. But so working through that, working through college, graduated, and then just really started focusing on my career and building my career. And that was my main goal, was to build a career in an industry that I could move up the corporate ladder, make a lot of money, be very self-sufficient, not have to rely on anyone, be successful in my eyes, what successful is. And so I worked very hard to do that for a really long time. I moved 13 times for my career. Every time, every move was a step up. Almost every move was a step up in the ladder, a promotion, more money, a bigger title. And then I got married. I got married in my late 30s, or mid to late 30s. And I had never wanted to get married, but I fell in love and wanted to really just be in a relationship. But this person really wanted to be married. It was important to her, and she had a daughter who became my stepdaughter, who I loved very much. And so we married in the 2004 San Francisco marriages, those first round of marriages. And I really came to embrace family and marriages once again. I was just so adamant about not having a family because of everything I went through. But I really began to embrace it. And as it turns out, my wife had a hidden drug problem. She became addicted to crystal meth in a city we lived in. We'd moved a few times to work, and she was also an alcoholic and became extremely abusive, extremely physically abusive. She broke my bones on a number of occasions. I had to have her arrested. There were a number of times I thought I was going to die at her abuse. And just living in that world and with a drug addict, anybody that's lived with a drug addict and an alcoholic, it's really just crazy. I mean, the amount of lies and manipulation and verbal, mental abuse, and then the physical abuse as well, which was horrific. So it took me 6 years to unwind from that and leave her, and it devastated me. And I divorced her, and I was devastated to lose my family and my stepdaughter. And from there, immediately as I was leaving that relationship, I took a position, the number 2 position of a corporation that owned 5 small companies in the industry I'm in. And I took the number 2 position under the CEO as the executive vice president, and I oversaw 3 of those firms. And I did this because I wanted to continue growing my career. And I did not know that I worked for a company that was really involved in organized crime. I mean, just a whole gamut of things, just a whole laundry list, including money laundering, but tax evasion and pay to play and bribery and for contracts, and just a whole litany of things. And as I started to uncover these things and started to question them and sort of push back on them, things just really went sideways for me at that job. And at one point I found listening devices in my office and remnants of one in my car, and I'm sure they were in my home. But long story short, that situation, they ended up poisoning me, trying to kill me. And they put poisons in my home, in my office, in my car. I was unknowingly inhaling them, ingesting them, wearing them on my clothes. I got extremely, extremely sick, and I couldn't figure out what it was. People at my office would say, what is wrong with you? And I would say, I don't know, but I'm so sick. I was losing my voice. I was raspy. I had sores in my throat and in my ears. My skin was gray. My eyes were very puffy. I had bad headaches. The right side of my face and body were just burning. As it turns out, that's because in my office, that was the side the poisons were on. And I had a space heater under my desk, and so I didn't realize I was heating these poisons up, and it was just literally burning me. So I finally found the poisons. I removed myself from the poisons, and as I removed myself each place from the poisons, those symptoms started to dissipate. But I knew I needed to get out. But at my level, there's not a ton of positions available. It's a small industry. And so it took me a little time to figure out my exit strategy and negotiate a new position with a new firm. And during that time, I didn't want to just leave. I wanted to find out why they did this to me. And so I felt adamant I couldn't let them beat me, and I needed to try to figure out what this situation was. As it turns out, they're just bad people. They ended up murdering one of the CEOs. So I was very lucky to have escaped it. But from those poisons and being poisoned for so long and exposed to those chemicals, I developed something called Graves' disease. It's an autoimmune. It's not curable. So I fought that for about a dozen years before I finally had my thyroid removed. So now that creates hypothyroidism. It's the hyperthyroidism. But so I dealt with Graves for many, many years. And I always told my friends, my close friends that if I ever got cancer, it would be because of those poisons. And
Hmm.
because I was worried, being so exposed to chemicals, and cancer doesn't run in my family. And sure enough, the gestation period for cancer when being exposed to chemicals is 7 to 8 years, and I was diagnosed at 7.5 years. So I went through the cancer treatment. I had double mastectomy, chemo, reconstruction, and the things that being poisoned and Graves'
Hmm.
disease and cancer and all those medications and chemo that you have to take during it, the ramifications of that on your body are just horrific. And so for years I've struggled with severe fatigue and severe body pain and just being sick for so many years. But I kept working and I kept building my career and I kept showing up and not letting anyone know what I was dealing with. But after I left that firm, I was so scared to death, almost being murdered. Just it scared me almost to death.
Hmm.
So I really shut down, and I lived in fear for years. And I wouldn't let people in my home. I didn't make new friends. I continued to move for my career and for this new job, but I wouldn't make new friends where I was, and I wouldn't let anyone in my home except for the people that I knew before all that happened. And if I met someone that I was dating, once I trusted them, then I would let them into my home. But I didn't, I really just shut down, and I constantly looked over my shoulder. I had the best security systems. I was always checking my rearview mirror. I just always lived in fear. And about 6 years ago, I hit a wall, and I said, I can't continue to live like this. I'm not thriving. I mean, I have an amazing life. I've created an incredible life for me financially and in my career, but I'm not living in joy. I'm not living in peace. I'm living in fear all the time. I continue to have horrific night terrors. And so when I hit that wall, I just decided I need to figure out how I can stop this cycle of trauma and tragedy. Why does this continue to happen to me? So in short, I started reading and digging in, trying to learn and understand how I could heal myself, heal my soul, heal my mind, heal my heart. I'd worked for years at healing my body and really focusing on that with Eastern and Western medicine, but I really needed to heal my soul and my mind so that I could live a life of peace and happiness. And so for the last 6 years, that's really what I've focused on. And I have made incredible headways and to learn to thrive and not just survive. I've been a survivor for so long of so many things, but I've really learned to thrive. And so that's where I'm at today.
Well, I had about 100 questions and you answered all of them.
Good, good.
So that was perfect. Now, one question I do have is how do people react to your story? Has it helped anybody?
People are shocked, honestly. I've had friends that I've known for 20 and 30 years, and they said, "Wow, I read your book and I didn't know any of this about you. How could I not know any of this?" But growing up in the home that I did, and in the cult, and in the family that I did, we didn't talk about anything other than God. We weren't allowed to express emotions. We weren't allowed to talk about our feelings. I mean, we weren't even allowed, us children, as sitting at the dinner table, to shoot dirty looks across the table at each other for anything. No emotion. My mother showed enough emotion for everyone every day, but we were not allowed to, and we didn't talk about anything other than God and the Bible. So I think once I grew up and left, I just shoved all that down. Everything I went through, I shoved down. Even when I was diagnosed with cancer, I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my work, other than a couple of owners. And then I eventually told my family, because they ended up coming out and helping me with my treatments and chemo and surgeries. But I really just didn't talk about how I felt or what I was going through to anyone. And so that the last 6 years has been so eye-opening, because writing this, I wrote the book, my memoir, it's called I Can't Believe I'm Not Dead. And I hired a ghostwriter, and having to talk about all that stuff and everything that I went through, a lot of it was the first time I talked about it. So that was a very healing process, a lot more than I expected. But so when my friends read this book, they were just in shock. And why didn't you tell me? And how could I not know? But I have had 3 different kinds of responses to the book in terms of people that it's helped. The first is, thank you for writing your book. Thank you for sharing your story. I align and relate to some of the things in your book. And it really is helpful for me to know that there's other people that have gone through those things and are now thriving. The other is, thank you for writing your book. And later in my book, I talk about my healing process. And not everything, because I've done so much and it's a continual process, but I talk about some of the core things that I did to heal. And so people have thanked me for sharing those, and they share that they've put some of those things in place and in practice, and it's really helping them. And then the third reaction that I get and that I love, this is my favorite, is after people have read the book, they say, wow, my life has not been so bad. I really need to get up and start feeling sorry for myself and start living my life and appreciating my life. And that's my favorite one. But I have just gotten incredible feedback, just a lot of love and appreciation for sharing the story. No negative feedback. It's really been wonderful.
Wow, that was excellent. Like I said, you covered all the bases. We're going to take a quick 30-second break, and we're going to be right back, continue talking with Kendra Petty.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
Listening to Kendra Petty's story today, I think all of us are in a bit of shock. On this channel, we have certainly had a lot of people with extreme stories, and their survival is what this Never Ever Give Up Hope podcast is all about. The human spirit is phenomenal in what it can handle, but even more than that, it's your attitude going through it, and on the opposite side, at the other side of the spectrum. We're going to talk about Kendra's healing process and how it may help you.
Thank you, Carol. So as I mentioned, 6 years ago, I hit a wall, and I just realized that I had been living in fear, in anger, and that I was stuck. I was really stuck in this fear and in this anger and in not letting people in my life and not making friends and just not being social. I used to be a very social person. And so when I hit this wall, I realized that I needed to make changes in hopes that it could help change the trajectory that I had lived my whole life of this cycle of trauma and tragedy. And so I didn't know if going down this healing path would change that trajectory, but I had to try something. I couldn't continue to live like this and couldn't continue in the night terrors and just, everything that I described in the way that I'd been living. So as I mentioned, I started digging in and reading and trying to understand how I could heal myself and heal my heart and my mind. And I spent a lot of time in Sedona. I spent a lot of time with healers. I read a lot. I listened to podcasts. I meditated. But a few of the practices that I took away from it that were most impactful for me, that I think hopefully could help some people, is I really believe in not getting stuck in blame, in woe is me, in anger, or toxic situations. And I never in my life spent any time blaming other people. I always actually hated when people said, oh, I'm this way because my dad left me, or oh, I'm this way because my mom beat me, or that would drive me nuts. I would say we all have to take responsibility for ourselves as adults. And you have to figure out how to heal from your trauma, from your childhood or your adversity or whatever your loss. But you can't blame that for your future life. So I always say, don't get stuck. Don't get stuck in blame. Don't get stuck in feeling sorry for yourself. There was never a moment in my life that I felt sorry for myself. I just kept forging ahead. And thank goodness I was born with a very, very strong inner strength.
Tenacity.
Tenacity and an inner strength, in my mind and in my heart to move forward and just keep moving forward. So don't get stuck. but also don't get stuck in toxic situations. And I have certainly been stuck in a number of toxic
Mhm.
situations, and when you're raised in a toxic family and household, that sets the bar for you in your adulthood, that you can tolerate so much more. And I didn't realize this for so long, that I stayed in my marriage longer than I should have when I knew I needed to get out. But my tolerance level for that was so much higher than many other people's because of what I had been through in my childhood. And same with my work. I was only with that company for 3 years, and I knew at about a year and a half, or 2 years, at about a year and a half, I felt like I should look for something else. And at 2 years, a little over 2 years, is when I found the poisons and got really sick. So it took me, not quite a year to get out, but learning to remove myself from toxic situations. And when I hit that wall and I started making major changes in my life, one of the things I did was I ended toxic friendships. I removed myself from those friendships. And as I made new friendships and got to know new people, if I saw that there was toxicity or negativity, I ended that friendship. And the same with family members. I did the same with family members. So it takes you time to sometimes get unstuck from these situations, but it's so important to not get stuck in toxic situations or relationships. Second, I really started focusing on gratitude. Gratitude is such a big part of my life today, and I always was. I was always very grateful for my career, my success. Very, very grateful, and I never took that for granted. But I really started focusing on gratitude for all things in my life and practicing it daily. And it makes such a big difference for me. It changes those neural pathways. It creates serotonin. It makes you happier, and it truly does. I'm a testament to it. And then third, letting my walls down. And this was really hard for me to let my walls down because, again, like I said, I lived in fear for so long, and I shut so many people out. So really letting my walls down, letting people in, letting love in, again, letting more friendships and making more friendships. The first thing I did, I called it my year of change. When I hit that wall and said, I'm going to make changes, I said, this next year is my year of change. And I really started making a lot of changes. And one of the first things I did was I threw a huge New Year's Eve party, 85 people in my house. I had it catered. I had bartenders. People flew in for it from all over. I had, fire dancers and fire performers and other kind of performers. And it was just a huge party. And for me, it was a celebration of, this is my year of change. Things are going to be different. I'm focusing on me. I'm not going to let what happened to me create all this fear around me. And so that was sort of my kickoff. And then I really started all these other practices. So I really did let my walls down. I made a lot more friends. I'm very careful about my friendships, but I also am very grateful for my friendships, and I make time for them, and I let them know how grateful I am. But then also, lastly, forgiveness and release. So forgiveness is a very tough one for many of us, but I really had to start focusing on and writing down who I needed to forgive. And there's so many people in my life that I needed to forgive, but also forgiveness for myself, for what happened to my brother, because I blamed myself my whole life. My whole life, I blamed myself for my brother's death, and I was just wrecked with guilt and anxiety over that. And so really working on forgiving myself for that and forgiving other people. And that's a process for me. I'm not 100% there yet. It's something that I work on, but I've come so far. And I've also heard another theory about forgiveness. You have to acknowledge those that have hurt you and work through that process. But if you don't want to forgive them, then don't forgive them. But you've got to release all that anger and angst that it causes you. So there's some mixed thoughts on forgiveness. But for me, it's really trying to forgive and release for all those folks that have hurt me, all those people that have hurt me, and then also for myself. But then there's so many other modalities that I've worked through, podcasts and reading books and meditating and spending a lot of time in Sedona with healers and energy workers and trying to realign my energy. But the other two things I did was I got a tattoo on my hand, on my palm, that says lucky, because I knew I needed a reminder every day of how lucky I am to be alive. I've escaped death so many times, so many more times that are in that book. And I'm lucky and blessed and fortunate to be alive and to be thriving and to be happy. And and to live the life that I live. So I didn't want a Post-it note on my mirror or, some other kind of reminder. So I got a tattoo on my palm that says Lucky, and it's just for me. It's my only tattoo, but I can look at it every day, and it's my daily reminder that I'm lucky to be here. And the other thing I did was I wrote the book. I wrote the book, my memoir called I Can't Believe I'm Not Dead. And in it, it talks about a lot of my experiences, not all of them. My friends that read it were like, oh, there's so much missing. But, sort of the core things. And then it really kind of walks through some of my healing processes, some of the things that I just touched through. And that was really a huge shift for me, talking about it and now doing things like this, these podcasts and these interviews where I talk more about it. It's all so healing for me. Every day I heal a little bit more.
People that find themselves in these type of situations, not as extreme as yours, but possibly, as you said, those who are reading your book are relating to certain things. What can they do? Any place that possibly you could encourage them to start?
Yeah, I think first and foremost is getting yourself unstuck. Whether you're stuck in anger, or you're stuck in blame or pity, or you're stuck in a toxic situation, you have to figure out how to get unstuck from your toxic relationship, your toxic work environment, whatever the toxicity is, friendships, and remove yourself from that. And sometimes it takes time. It took me a long time to figure out how to get out of my marriage. And I knew I needed to. I knew I needed to for a long time. I would say, how did I get myself into this? And the next question would be, how do I get myself out of it? But It took me 6 years to unwind from it, and then a number of years to heal from it. And so during that time, I had to find things that brought me joy. And I encourage people, anyone that's in that situation, that's trying to unwind from any kind of a toxic situation, or from anger or from blame, find things that bring you joy. Do things that bring you joy, that make you happy. It helps in the healing process. It helps alleviate some of that pain while you're unwinding from whatever it is you have to unwind for. But then really those other 3 steps are, I just think they're crucial, and you'll read them in so many other places and books. Practicing gratitude, letting your walls down, letting love in, and forgiveness, practicing forgiveness. I think those are also important. But I've also learned in all of this is talking through it. And for me, not so much therapy, but just talking in these podcasts. I wrote the book with my ghostwriter. Having to talk about it. It's been so healing for me. So, therapy for anyone that feels they need it or needs someone to talk to is so important.
The bottom line is, no matter what you've been through, you can not only survive, but you can thrive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now what's happening? What are you doing?
Well, I'm doing a whole lot of interviews and podcasts, and I did a little thing a couple weeks ago with iHeartRadio. But just talking about my story and sharing my journey, my healing, my path to healing, because when I first started writing the book, I did not want to publish it. I just felt like I needed to get my crazy life down in writing. So when I hired my ghostwriter, who's an incredible published author, she's worked for Simon & Schuster and Random House. She really knows her stuff. And I told her when I hired her, I don't want to publish this. I just need this insanity down in writing for me, for maybe my family and friends. And as we worked through the process, she was like, oh my gosh, you have to publish this. You have to share this story. This could help so many people. And for a little over 2 years, I pushed back. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It makes me too vulnerable. But then the more I thought about it, I thought there's got to be a reason why I'm still alive. There has to be a reason why I am not dead. And I decided maybe the reason is that I'm supposed to share my story, and maybe it will help some people. So I've really focused on sharing my story, sharing my healing path. I hired a company about 6 months ago to help me create a company for a public speaking platform. So now I've launched that, and I've started public speaking around my story. Next month I speak at the IVAT conference in San Diego. It's the International Violence and Trauma Institute, the Institute of Violence and Trauma. And it's just an incredible organization that really focuses on all kinds of violence and trauma around the world and how you heal. So there's about 1,000 attendees. I'm in a session, not as a keynote speaker, but in a session. So I'm very excited to share my story and my healing path to that. in the hour that they've given me. So I've really just focused on how can I share my story and how can I be involved in some of these organizations that really focus and help on healing from trauma and preventing violence, because I've been, unfortunately, through a lot of violence. And so that's really just become my passion, is how can I help other people? It's a mindset, for sure. It is a mindset. I think part of it is the inner strength that I was born with, and like you say, never ever give up. Never give up. Just keep forging ahead. And I just knew that there was something bigger and better for me. That's why I continued to live, and I needed to find that purpose. But it really is a mindset, 100%. And that's why I think practicing gratitude and forgiveness and not getting stuck in anger and blame and woe is me, it is a mindset that you have to create for yourself. And because of all the process that I've been through for the last 6 years, I hardly ever have a night terror anymore. My night terrors have gone from 150 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour. So that's just been an incredibly impactful healing process.
You've given us a lot to think about, and this is definitely motivating. Just to hear your story and knowing that you don't have to be stuck, that there is a way out, and you have explained that thoroughly, and it is very, very much appreciated. Do you go into this type, besides your story in your book, do you go into possibly steps of what people can do for themselves as well, or is it strictly your story?
In my book, I do talk about my steps to healing. Not all of them, but some of the core ones, and how people can apply it. It's my memoir.
Right.
But there is definitely focus towards the end of the book in the last couple of chapters about things that people could put into practice.
Good. That's excellent. Well, thank you, Kendra, for being on Never Ever Give Up Hope. This is one interview that I think people should listen to more than once, and one we will not soon forget. So very much appreciated. Thank you.
Carol, thank you. It's an honor. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to Never Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.